before we go any further, I just want you to share a short joke. You see, there was these two old guys sitting on a bench. They always played baseball their whole life, and they're talking about, passing on. And I said, when Larry says to Joe, hey, we're going to be out of this place soon. Hopefully we'll be in heaven. And we're going to make a pact. We played baseball all our life. We love baseball. We go to baseball games even now. When one of us dies, the other guy's got to come back and tell me if there's baseball in heaven. So sure enough, Larry dies, and Joe's sitting on a bench by himself, and all of a sudden somebody comes up behind him, and it's the image of Larry. And he says, good news, there's baseball in heaven. He said, that's great. He says, I got some bad news. You're pitching Friday. I want to introduce Ken DeVore. He's in charge of our Veterans Affairs, and he coordinates his activities with Colonel Litters, who is over there and a board member. And good morning, everybody. And I just want you to welcome Ken. He's going to be reading the program. Ken?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, we want to thank our professional staff, PRMG, Marguerite Moore, and Ernie. And our annual sponsors are Covent Energy, Louis Joes Avalos, National Grid, Henry Sheen Building Instruction, Trade Council, Air Shower Recycling, and Winter Brothers. Advertising, planning, and technical services will be needed to keep our programs going. Please consider sponsoring a meeting. Today we're having our program today is about presiding over local government. The competence of planning of these important executives is the key to a well-managed municipality. Paul Pontieri has served as the village trustee for the mayor for more than 20 years. In that time, he has revitalized this historic village with $850 million in improvements. Paul gives his time to various not-for-profit units in the village and the town of Brookhaven. There is a more detailed account of Mayor Pontieri's service on your table. Please welcome our distinguished guest, Mayor Paul Pontieri.
Well, I look around the room and people actually grew up in Patchogue.
And Elmont.
You could have come to Baker Street down there. I don't know, John. But really, we've known each other. I came into office 19 years ago. And Ernie and I have known each other for probably 19 years. We met a little bit before that. I was a trustee before that.
Actually, we met when you were with Purolator.
Quickly, yeah. I was at Quick Collier. I had a messenger service. Little background, I was a principal for BOCES for 14 years. Left that, had a messenger courier business for 10 years. Sold that, ended up at Belport High School for 7.5 years. I always tell people at Belport High School job, best job I ever had. It really was just, I had a lot of fun. But you retire sometimes, and those that are retired, sometimes retirement is simply math. If you do the math, is it pay to stay or doesn't it pay to stay? And I retired, and I was a trustee and became mayor. And people like Charlie and Porter and Klein over there, they know me well enough. I took this job, I really didn't know what I wasn't supposed to be able to do. And I never followed the politics of development on Long Island enough to know that you weren't supposed to build 5-story buildings in the middle of downtown. Everything was supposed to be 35 feet or 40 feet. But it seemed like a good idea. And my sense was at that time, if somebody's going to come into my community and spend $100 million to build something, I'm going to tell them that they were stupid. That would have been a stupid one. But I also knew that the downtowns any community to grow, you had to have what I always call feet on the street. When I grew up in Patchogue. I've been there my whole life. It was always about the community supporting the downtown. Times have changed. And how do you support that downtown now? It's different. You know, Ryan McGarry was one of the residents that lives over on Lee Avenue. But he's the model of what the village has become. When I came to office, the average age was about 45. The average age in the county today is 42, the average age in the village is 36. It's because we built housing for that generation to move into. You know, people say, oh, $2,800 for a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom is too much money. How people, a lot of the young families can afford the $2,800, but they can't afford the 10 or 15 or 20% they have to put down on a $700,000 house. They need the space to be able to grow their family and grow and become part. And my hope always is that they come into New Village, they come into Copper Beach, which was the first one to put up art space, which is affordable for artists, 100% affordable. Copper Beach is on South Ocean Avenue, just before the tracks. And I would invite any of you to come down and point out to me immediately what the affordable units are. A lot of you know the developer, Mike Kelly. Mike was with Pulte Homes at the times, and I do just remember saying to him, I want to see something that has texture. I want to see something that has a look to it, because my philosophy from the very beginning is density. We all do density by math. How many acres, how many units? You do the math, and then people get upset, and it gets crazy. Density is a product of design. If you design it right, you will find that the community will accept it. When we built built New Village, it's 291 residential units right in the middle of the village, right in the downtown, the Four Corners. We never talked about 291 units. In my office, I have a picture that was taken in 1907. It's probably 4 foot by 4 foot, big thing up on a wall. Looking up Ocean Avenue, the old Sweezy's department store, those of you that remember it. But at that time, it was 5 stories. Yeah. My conference room, which you can see from where you stand there, is a large rendering of what's on the Four Corners now. When you look at it, people come in and they'll talk about that. I go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The village had 4 and 5 story buildings back in the day when it was originally built. So, and when I was talking to the Conlins, Bob and Jim, I always talked about design. Give me a look. I had to speak to the Historical Society. I gave them a book on the history of Patchogue. And my whole point to them was that before you think you know who we are, here's the book. This is who we are. Just take, and when you look at the two of them, they're different. There are things about them that, but there's that sense of history in it. Copper Beach, every unit is different. The affordable units have one look. They haven't got shutters. The market units have shutters. If you went inside, you'll see that the affordable units have, black and white stoves and refrigerators. You go into the market rates, it's stainless steel. But the exterior look is what's important. So, like I said, I knew what I liked. I tell people all the time, we have a big development being proposed at this time. And I just said to them, he said, well, what do you think? I said, I don't know what I do like, but I can look at something and tell you I don't like it, and it doesn't fit. And then we'll just keep, maybe it's a fix. So, my history of doing this is just all about it. One other thing too, some of you are developers, some of you are engineers, some of you are physicists. Who am I to tell you how to spend $100 million? Who am I to tell Tritech You know, you shouldn't spend that kind of money. Those of you that are coming to the village, if you come down, you know, Waverly Avenue behind the brewery, you see this library, Carnegie Library, that was picked up. The only thing that we asked them to do was to save the library, if there was a way to do it. Rob Clark, who was our county legislator at the time, found the spot. And it fit in the spot like a hand in a glove. And I've had people say to me, because next to us, the Suffolk County Courthouse, people say to me, how the hell could you build such an ugly building next to such a beautiful building? Because when they moved the library in there was a stand of trees that have been there for 25, 30 years. If it did right, it looks like it's always been there. You know, the other thing I find is concerning sometimes, there's a lot of municipalities make demands upon the developer. We need a give back of something. And I just always kind of figured, where do I want them to put the money? I can figure out how to get money to rebuild a municipal pool. So why should I go to the developer and give Project Bay Village down at the end of 62 condo units? Why should I try to grab money out of them that would typically go back into making a better project? There's only so much money that can go around. There's only so much money people can make. You know, we've had over $800 million worth of construction. But you marry that to about $80 million worth of grants. I don't pay for anything. You know, we're having the Shorefront Park we built at this point in time. A grant, sewer plant. Appreciate the story. We're going to upgrade our sewer plant from 800,000 gallons to 1 million to it's a $12 million project. How do you get the money to do that without going to the taxpayer? Our sewer district isn't big enough to afford that. So we go to the REDC, Regional Economic Development Council, and we say, okay, 400,000 gallons, we're going to take 200,000, because that's what we need for the village. The other 200, we can spread outside the village, into East Patchogue, into Bayport, but even Salem want to run along. They can run along. We get $7.7 million. But now I'm still $4 million short, but I know we have to put about $1 million ourselves in as a match. So back in June, beginning of July, when Zeldin was deciding he wanted to be the governor, I called his office. And I spoke to Mark Daly, and I said, no. Lee has a problem. He does not have any environmental program at all that he can talk to the community about. So at that point, there was dead silence. And he goes, and? I said, I need $3.5 million out of the sewer plant. And I talked about the whole idea of spreading it across, not just the village. Within 3 weeks, not even a month, we get a call from Schumer's office. Now, we never talked to Schumer. The very first I talked to was Congressman Zeldin. We get to 3.5. So now I'm close to my $12 million, and I'll figure out how to get the rest of it. In fact, what we're using is we put, you know, you have that PPP money, ARP money, whatever that was, you got about $1 million, so we put that aside for the sewer plant. So that sewer plant will get itself rebuilt without costing the resident taxpayer $1, without costing the sewer district $1. It's through grants. And the grants are out there. I've had other mayors say to me, how do you get so much money? You gotta have a good story and you gotta just ask. Because there's in the feds, there's money. In the state, there's money, the RDC. But you gotta have a good story. You gotta make it so, and you don't only go to one place. You ask for 2 or 3 people. And then you cobble it together. You know, we probably paid 80% of the roads, and I don't think we paid out of our own pocket. You know, there's a project up on Sunrise Highway outside the village that they ran condos. The hookup fee was $2 million. I went to the state, and I said to them, because sewer money has to stay in the sewer district. Sewer's creating pressure on the infrastructure, can we use 40% of it for infrastructure? So we took $800,000 and started paving streets at $100 million. But it's the story you tell and how you do it. When you're someplace long enough too, people realize if you ask the question and you get it. I don't care who cuts the ribbon. It doesn't matter. It just means I have a ribbon to cut. I don't need, I mean, even coming here today, I could have slept late. We all could have slept late. I look like lying and people came from Patchogue, I'd say, why? But,
Well, I wanted to ask you about
Yeah.
the parking in the village. It has been very tenuous.
well, you know, Jack Krieger, deputy mayor, always says the parking problem is empty spaces. So what we're doing now is we have behind the courthouse, there's 125, 128 spaces. We've got $1 million from the county. And it's a $2 million project. We will pay the rest off with meters. But we're going to expand that to about 210 spaces. So we're going to add another 80 or 90 spaces. So we keep plucking up areas and trying to grow it. Yes?
Why don't you go up in the parking garage then?
Because you know what? A parking garage costs you about $7 million. And you can't get a return to pay. It's a $7 million cost would have to come out of resident taxpayer dollars. And
Look, your contractor paid for it.
you know, a $7 million nuts for parking.
Well, you can make it green too. You can put solar panels on the roof, get electricity back.
You're talking about solar panels. We're working with Johnson Controls right now about a program to actually put solar panels on that whole piece and run the electric from the solar panels to the sewer plant to pay for the electric, because the sewer plant is about $18,000 a month worth of it. But no, we've looked at, I just keep looking at the cost. And I think that it's not only a single cost to that. You know, once you put up the parking garage, there's a security piece to it. You have to start, you know, you're gonna have to put, you know, public safety or somebody up on 24 hours. It just,
But if you charge for parking, people are rich, rich people will Teslas will park in the parking garage and pay for itself.
it's a look, it's a thought, but like I said, I just keep looking at $7.7 million or and that was 3-4 years ago, so I can't imagine what it is, and that's probably the price of the sewer plant.
And ongoing maintenance too.
Yeah,
Huntington and Hicksville will have a lot of that.
So can I just ask you,
Yes.
Mayor Pontieri, so what you're saying is, this is really good. You're talking about that space, it's like right next to Project Safety Net,
Yeah.
that big parking lot, and you're just saying piggyback on that and grow that, right?
We're building that out to its
Yes,
large as it can go, and adding the solar panels
right.
to pick up the cost of the electric end.
And are are those gonna be the way they are now? People don't have to pay for those, so they're going to have to pay
After 6 o'clock,
after 6 o'clock at night? It's free. That's great.
up to 6.
And I can testify to the fact that there's a lot of, if you don't know the area, it might be difficult, but once you do, there's a lot of parking, and free parking too, because I find it.
You know, one of the issues I always talk about too is, I'm very fortunate that the mayors prior to me was so smart. You go back to 1907 is when they first put the sewer lines in. Now probably they were just gravity lines out to the bay that flush and run straight to the bay, and who knows what happened on the way down. 25, the mayor at that point built the first plant. And in 1950, they upgraded it, and that was with George Electric. He also preserved 30 acres of parkland on the bay. The guy had was Bob Wallbauer. Many of you probably worked with Bob on different things. But Bob and Electric, when the Suffolk County PD came into place, we had our own police department, and they weren't going to do it unless in the charter it says Suffolk 5th precinct will always be in the village, which makes all the difference in the world. But Jeff, the precinct itself, it takes them 15 minutes to get to the second car there. We have a problem on Main Street, and the four sectors meet at the four corners. But also, under Waldauer, they built 2,200 municipal parking spaces. They got the businesses agreed to a set price per square foot for properties they own in and around their buildings, and built 2,200 parking spaces. You know, and you just keep taking that and following it through. The Norman Electric, who was the mayor in the 80s, and when I first came in, first vote I took was an expansion of the sewer plant from 125,000 gallons per day to 500,000. And I kicked myself, so I never asked him why he went to 500,000. The interesting thing was is that the day that I was sworn in as a trustee, my first vote was that. The Long Island Advance, or the Main Street Press, had a headline that said, Village borrows $1.1 million to expand plant. Then, in the last paragraph of that article, about that big, it said, Paul Pontieri, Village Trustee, point to Village Trustee. So I've always taken second place to the sewer plant since my first day.
Well, not here.
It has always been one of the
You're not second place.
Right.
Yes.
I know you enough to remember stories. The theater, tell us all about the theater and how you kept it around.
Well, the thing about it is, you know, after Electric did that, Mayor Steve Keaton came in. And he got 3 or 4 members of the community, Bill Knapp, Artie Fusillo, I think Rick Rose, and then remember 1 or 2 others, to put $450,000 together and buy the theater. And turn it over to the village with the proviso that when the village got the funding in place, they would pay back. So Keegan took the highway department and stuck them in the theater and began to tear it apart. And they realized once they tore, I don't know if I remember what was it, the triplex?
Yes, yes, they
But
do.
with all the paneling, that everything behind the paneling was still there. And they put about $6 million into it. When I came into office, it was after Ed I, we really focused on making sure that it was profitable for the downtown. And then, in fact, about 5 years ago, we put another $1 million into it and redid it, put new seats in it, and just. But during that period of time, I had gotten a call from a donor in the village. She asked me to stop by her office. And where's Patrick and me? We talked about a couple things. And I sit on a board for an organization called IGHL, I chair the board. I'm having lunch, so we meet, we talk. I figure if I can get $500,000, I can fix a ballpark. She calls me the next day, I'm having dinner with the CEO from IGHL. We're having lunch, and the phone rings, and it's hard. She says, I just want to be clear though, I'm talking about $5 million.
Wow.
Because I had said to her, the single thing that costs village residents is parks and recreation. So we took about $350,000, $400,000 of that. We put that into the theater for the seats. And that $5 million, we took $2.5 million and did it for the theater and fixed up all the pocket parks. But we also made the decision to rebuild the shore park. So what we're doing right now is we're taking out all of the bulkheading and putting a living shoreline, a rock sill all through the whole thing. The problem that we always had was it took 6, almost 7 years to get all the permits in place.
Is that a revenue generator for you?
No. The revenue generator is me asking everybody for money so we can pay for it. You know? Because, so we got 2.5 from the state. We put the 2.5 there, now we got the 5 million, now the cost goes up to 7. So we gotta go back to the state, and they gave us more money because they already put money into it, so if I couldn't finish it, it didn't happen because of us. It was a DEC and the Army Corps that stretched this thing out forever. And then I went back to the donor and got another $1 million.
Oh,
You know, so I guess the point is that I've been around long enough for people to trust what I say, they don't do what I say, and I don't play a lot of games. And,
Paul, you had a question?
yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but underestimate what we can do in 5 years. We recognize and admire what you've accomplished in the last 5, 10, 15 years. What's your goal for the next 5?
We'll go for the next one.
Could you get that one?
You know, I don't, it's not a business where you can set those kind of goals. I think it's a business, when I first came in, my goal was to do something with Main Street. How do we redefine Main Street? We did that with between art space and housing and rebuilding the theater, turning it, you know, we never had an art council before, now we have one of the largest ones on Long Island. We're in a situation that the records, we're going to get the record of building a 190 unit gray barn apartments just outside the village line across the street. There's a building, and they're going to be donating that to the Arts Council. So because what they see us having done in the village, they're going to invest in its own way in the village. East Patchogue is a gateway to the village of Patchogue. We put sewer lines down in there, and we work to make that. So when you talk about goals, goals is just to keep a steady pace of growth. And goals is making the community one where people want to stay. That the young families that move into an apartment decide they want to stay within the village because, not because of the downtown. Yeah, the downtown makes a difference, but more importantly, because it's a good place to live. You know, just a sidebar, political sidebar to this whole thing is this housing zone that the state's putting in place. You know, and I mentioned it earlier in the conversation.
Does the village claim ownership of the theater, or is it?
Yes, it's ours.
Okay, so
And there's a not-for-profit that runs it.
then is it a revenue stream for the village?
Is it a revenue stream? They pay all their own bills. We don't get tax dollars out of it. We don't charge it for the sewer, obviously. But the tax stream that the dollar stream that it creates is the success of the buildings on Main Street. When in 2019, the Long Island Regional Planning Council did an economic study that looked at Patchogue 2004 to that point. And what effect did it have? The biggest effect that it had is now those 291 units on the four corners, there's an IDA benefits that they're working their way through. Our space, that's 100%, they don't pay any taxes. There were a couple of other small IDAs. School district, 2014, 2019, it was up $5 million. And that's what IDA benefit, because of the values that we created between that and the theater does, and how we manage the village and how we manage the village in dollars. I'll tell you another story, you're business people here. The most important thing you can have is a reserve. You can look at the business any way you want to look at it. But if you get to the bottom line, and what you're doing is using a rounding number at the end of the sentence as your reserves, then you got problems. When I came into office, we had about $200,000 in reserves. Right now, we got about $4.7 million in reserves.
Wow.
And I had the controller's office. That doesn't count 1.2 million sewer reserves. So, yes.
Rob Trotta seems to be fighting a lonely battle about the role of police unions in elections. You're an elected official. Do you have an opinion on that subject?
I'm an elected official, but I officially don't consider myself that. In the sense that Ron Trotta has his own battle that he has, whether it's with the PD or with the system in general. I just know that the time I give, and maybe it's the difference between being a county legislator and being a board You know,
Yeah.
if you're in a village, you're dealing with your neighbors,
Yes.
you're dealing with everybody you know. You know, the issue with the Suffolk County PD, I don't have any, they are the best. You know, by being in the village, that inspector is almost like the chief of police, you know, for the village of Patchogue. He shows up at everything that we do. So, I try to stay ahead of that stuff.
You know what, I was thinking as I'm listening to you, when it comes to revenue building, right?
Yeah.
You have a very organic, and I think that's the true success of what you did. It's a real model for Long Island, especially Suffolk County, that needs help. So the revenue builder, the way I see it is, if you looked at what is the value of houses there now? How many businesses want to come there? How many people are renting there? Vibrancy. I walk around there, and I've been to other nice little Bay Shore, whatever. It's a vibrant place where everybody, and that is a holistic revenue builder.
Well, you know, the thing about it is too,
Because of the beauty too.
one of the things that we have in the village, you know, we have a lot of restaurants. I think we have 30 or 40, whatever numbers.
Right.
But we have a restaurant committee of businesses that work together to put together, they compete against each other when they don't lock their door, but they work with each other
Yeah.
to make sure that any programs they put in place work for everybody. You know, when we do the Alive After Fives, it's not a decision that comes out of my office. It's not a decision that comes out of the chamber's office. It comes out of the businesses. How do you want to do this? How are we going to make it work? How are we going to make sure that it doesn't affect other businesses? The Alive After Five that we talked about, because it affects the Ore, the Harbor Crab, Lombardi's on the Bay, because it cuts off Main Street. So it really is about these groups working together. When I first came into office, we had a BID, Business Improvement District. When I first came into office, the BID was fighting with the chamber, which was fighting with the village. And I just said, guys, you got really no choices. Two choices, either work with me, or if you can't speak, I'll beat you no matter what happens. Because, and we got everybody kind of sit at the same table and figure out what's best for the village. The BID is, the Business Improvement District, is such an asset. Dennis Smith, who runs it, had gotten probably $1.3 million, $1.4 million in New York State facade grants that turned into almost $3 million worth of improvements. So I put the BID, and I had an empty office space in the office. And he was making at the time, I think, $30,000 a year. But he was so good. And I looked at him and I said to myself, you know, it's easy to quit a $30,000 a year job. It's not as easy to quit a $50,000 a year job. So the village now, we paid him up to 50. And I couldn't lose him. And he was so important to the bid, so important to stuff that I was doing, and we were working with him. So now he makes about $75,000 a year, but he's worth every penny.
Yep.
And because he's in the office, the bid in the village, the things that we do together, like right now that they're looking to get, the Bills is going to pay, I think we're going to pick up 60%, they're going to pick up 40% of all new Christmas lighting. But it's their plan to put together. We support it in dollars because it goes up on our poles and in our village. And it's important to our businesses. So I try to do things that are important for both sides. I don't want to get into the political realm of what's good for the residents, what's good for this. I don't have any patience for that. Like I said.
You know, a few years ago, I remember you hosted a LIMBA meeting at the theater.
Yes.
And we were so impressed with what the equipment that you invested in that theater.
But, at the time, it's about $700,000.
You know, so it was like, I'm talking about the technical, not the
Yes,
seats.
I mean, yeah. No, it's $700,000 just in the technical side of it. Yes.
Speaking of the Patchogue Theater, we were just talking about not really a revenue maker, My wife and I retired. We love to go to great concerts. That is a moneymaker as far as what it does to the town.
Oh, yes.
Because the Patchogue Theater, you're competing against great theaters in the whole area.
Yeah.
We saw, my wife and I, the Monkeys there a year ago.
Yeah.
We saw so many great concerts. And as a Woodstock veteran from 1969, when I was 17, I danced in that theater. I danced in that theater. They don't mind. They don't mind, because they see me dance, they say, keep going. It's a beautiful theater. Thank
It
you.
is. It is. Well, you guys know, it's acoustically pure. You can stand. That was
I'm
built
thinking
in
of hiring an out for a one-man show. You saw my act.
We can make it a two-man show. I'm very good dancer.
Hopefully
there'll be more than one person in the audience.
Yes.
Bringing back interesting memories, I think it was a debate that I went to, perhaps after you were elected for a certain period of time, where there was a great movement to get rid of you
Yes.
because they didn't want any of the building. They wanted to fill the restaurants. And your point of view was obviously if you don't have people in the town, who's going to go to the restaurants?
That's right.
But can you tell, I remember it was kind of ugly for a period of time, and your opinion was that they don't want me, and apparently they wanted you.
Well, you say that because at that same time, Steve Malone, the county executive Malone, was having a fundraiser at Lombardi's. Well, in the middle of the election, getting ugly, people are throwing rocks at each other. And I walk in and I said, how you doing? He said, well, how's the election going? And I looked up and said, well, hey, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I have Monday nights off. I said, that's the worst that can happen. He grabbed my sleeve, dragged me out of the car, and said, you don't get it. I said, what don't I get? He said, you lose, we all lose.
That's right.
He said, there are projects, he said, that I know are sitting out there, people just waiting to see what Patchogue does.
Yep.
Do they throw you out because you are doing something too big? They throw you out because you try to revitalize it. He said, no matter, whatever the reason is, he said, yours is right now the most important election that happens on. He said, more important than mine when it comes up. I said, oh, okay. Just saying. And I hadn't realized it. Like I said, every job is ego-driven in some way, shape, or form. But mine has never been in a sense that I'm better than anybody else or I'm smarter than anybody else. Mine is only about, well, what can we get? What can we get done? How can we get it done? And where can I squeeze the money from to get it done?
You know, you may be in the wrong business because you're an honest man.
Yeah.
Yes.
You started to talk about the state proposal
Yes.
for 50 units per acre zoning within a half mile of train station, but you didn't finish. I think you had a question.
Well, you know, there's a couple things that really bother me about it. Believe it or not, the first is the fact that this piece of what quotas legislation is in a budget bill. It's not as a legislative action. This is a budget action.
Right.
And if you think about that, she's talking about giving school districts $500 billion, well, whatever it may be. Is she tying one to the other? Is there going to be a push at the end? You got to vote for this, or you don't get this. And the $500 billion becomes a bigger deal for your local politician than whatever this housing bill does, which talks about it. And what gets me crazy is that this ain't Long Island. You got to go by 3%. But upstate, where there are more cows than people, it's only 1%. Why wouldn't you put your money in an area where you have the open space and you have the ability, and you probably can revitalize communities up north of the city, then try to push it onto Long Island where you have more houses that you got more people than houses, and it doesn't make sense. And the fact that it's in the budget bill, I don't think people realize how critical that is. Once that budget bill passes, then it passes. That's what happened with cannabis. That's what happened with the bail reform. That's what happened with the 2% tax cut. Whether you agree with any of those, you don't agree with them. They were not ever really vetted in a meeting like this. Nobody ever came to a meeting like this and didn't talk about that. And I got a real problem with that.
Well, to me, here's the question. If we have to grow the population, we're talking about 3% a year, on and on and on, where are we going to get the water?
It's water, it's sewers,
Yeah, of course.
septic systems, it's all of those things.
Highways.
Highways, yeah. electric, they keep talking about it, by 2035, you have all these electric cars, in the Village of Patchogue, I think that there are 4 charging stations, and we have 2.
And the last meeting we were at, remember, it was telecommunications, it was fascinating, I learned so much from these meetings. And I hear a common theme, whether it's the telecommunications or transportation, and that is the resistance to change, right? So they wanted 5G, that will increase Wi-Fi, that will bring people in. You can't grow like they're asking us to if we're not putting in the infrastructure and you have some people that are resistant to change.
Well, I think what gets me crazy too is, so there's, I go on this Zoom meeting and listen to all this stuff about this, and at the end of it, they talk about the 3%. I call the local rep, Marissa, I think it was Rodriguez or something, I think Espinosa, and I call her up and I say to her, since 2004, we built over 700 residential units in the village.
Right.
How does that count into this calculation? She said, well, it does. I said, it doesn't count. She goes, no, it's based upon the 2020 census, that you have to grow by 3% from the 2020 census. I said, but we built all that stuff prior. It doesn't matter, it doesn't count. And that gets me crazy. Listen, in the village, this housing bill has no effect at all. Because we have, around the train station, around our downtown, we have enough industrial property to build another housing. In fact, we got a project that's coming across with about 450 units. And it's on Main Street across the YMCA and the brewery. There's a steel yard and PS, National Grid properties. So it doesn't really affect them. But it affects, how do you build units around Sable? They don't have a sewer plant. You go 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet to the train station, you got 100-year-old legacy homes.
Well, there is a sewer plant. Dowling College was closed. They had a sewer plant.
What's that?
Dowling had a sewer plant. Dowling College was Oakdale.
They have the sewers, the Oakdale does, but Sable
$1
doesn't.
million a mile to run a line.
They both.
And we're gonna allow 200,000 to leave us. Little side story to that 200,000 gallons. One of the things that we do is out of village, out of district connections, they pay $30 a gallon. So 200,000 gallons equates to about $6 million. So anybody that hooks up on the outside, we're gonna end up with $6 million at the end of the game. So this is another way to make money.
So you're talking about the Blue Point thing? You're talking about the Blue Point extension?
They have to pay a $30 a gallon to hook into us, whatever the number of gallons is.
Until the state passes another law that says that you can't make a profit.
Right. Until they squeeze you with that, you have to give it to them.
Well, but it is warring faction, like, I keep hearing the themes in all the different meetings, and there's these warring factions, like, these businessmen came in and they're like incredulous, they're like, we just wanna upgrade the Wi-Fi, and then we go to the municipals, and they're very, receptive, and then we have a meeting, and we have all these people with red t-shirts saying no, and they're afraid they're gonna get cancer, but that happens.
Well, it's interesting.
So that's the grassroots part.
And I understand talking to the public and talking in venues like this, but when we built things, we didn't hold those charrettes where you bring everybody in and they tell you what they want.
Yes.
Because typically they tell you they want things that you can't get.
Right.
You're not gonna get an Old Navy, you're not gonna get a Gap, you're not gonna get all of these kinds of things. There's a reality. And mine is that you speak to groups like this, and some of you are investors, some of you are engineers, some of you work for the county, some of you, it's a whole number of different things. And you talk about the reality. The reality is the guy that comes in with money in his pocket and wants to invest in your community, has looked at your community as a place to invest in.
Right.
And my job is to figure out how to take that money out of your pocket, put it into the village, in a way that's good for the village.
Win-win, find that win-win.
Quick story. I think many of you over the years knew David Sloan, a former attorney, probably one of an old Patchogue guy, I've known him since I'm 10 years old. He came in with the Coggins. And I had a table like this in my conference room, and he sat at the head of the table. The Coggins sat on one side of the table, I sat at the other side of the table. They were talking about a piece of property down the end of River Avenue, which was an old oil terminal, Patchogue oil terminal. And that they wanted to build something there, but because it was an oil terminal, obviously it had those obvious problems. So at the end of the meeting, it's not going to work. It's not to get up. And they're getting ready to walk out. God, we can't do anything. And Slumgers are like, Paulie. They got freaking $30 million in their pocket. You're going to let them walk out the door? I said, David, what do we do? Tell them to get the fuck in my car. Let's take them for a ride and see what and $100 million later. So he's a guy that told me, you never let them leave the room with any money. If they come in talking about something, that means they got money in their pocket, they've done their research, and they think you're a good place to be. You know, so I don't let anybody walk out of my room.
Mayor, resident of Patchogue, or my business has been located there for 20 years, and I came to Patchogue because of the efforts of Steve Keegan, the former mayor, and Dave Kennedy, and there was a 4-year period where, and those guys did tremendous work in laying that foundation to the current revitalization. And there was a 4-year period that things didn't, not that much happened there.
Yeah.
But obviously you came in and that attracted me, and I moved in 2004, and I love to tell people that the building I own I'm the second owner. It's been there for 90 years this year. So it was a former doctor's office. And I just also wanted to remark about, you were talking about election, that election that occurred, it was around, what, 2010 or so, or 12? And I think you know this, that you know, I handled that election for your opponents. And you were, I have to tell you, you were right. I was wrong. And what you did was you helped to overcome the fear that people had for those downtown apartments, high density, whatever you would call it. And you did, and I that's the first I heard of that conversation with Steve Malone, and you did help to transform, and it's hard to believe it's only been 10 years, the attitude changes on Long Island and the things that have happened there. So I just wanted to apologize for anything I said in those campaign but I also want to thank you for always being courteous and nice, and we've always had a good relationship, and I did avoid you for about a year. But anyway, thank you. Thank you for making Patchogue a tremendous event.
That's all our PR work.
Okay.
And he does a great job. I just want you to know.
To that kind of story, when Laura Curran was running for county executive the first time, Jack Martins was running against her. And Jack and I have known Jack because he was a mayor of Mineola. We would always talk. You know, it was back and forth. So I get a call from Newsday that he mentions my name, and what do you think of it? And I said, I think he's a great administrator. I said, he did a great job in Mineola. I said, Laura, county legislator, I don't know what her leadership is doing. So, yeah, it was an endorsement of Jack, but not really a hammering him up, but just stating a fact. In January, it was November, in January, Libby has this luncheon, everybody to the luncheon. And I sit down, there's my name tag, and who's the name tag next to Laura Curran? I said, oh man. I turned, and this is what I say to you, is I turned and I looked at her, I was going to say something, she said to me, it was an election. He was a friend, and I understand the comments. That was it. In fact, she called me the other night about this housing bill. You know, we talk all the time. And so I've always looked at that, you know, that's how you handle it, and the way you handle it. It is what it is. You got hired to do something. I could have hired you to do it, and you probably, I could have convinced you that I was right. Because that's your job.
This decorum, though, this civility right now, this is what's missing in the country. It's beautiful to see. And last time they were like, how do we get to the people, remember? And remember they were saying, how do we do that? Like, they were incredulous. And I'm listening to you, and I'm like, this is the model. It really, really is, because the way that it sounds that you did it was, you had a loose understanding of it, but you allowed committees to come in. They have a nonprofit committee. I'm gonna keep saying it, Chamber. Nobody else on the island has it, and they're amazing. But there's an ownership. Everybody that's working in Patchogue, whether they're a nonprofit like us or you're a business, they have an investment. They feel a part of that community, and it's very, very special. And that's the model. How do you bring in people from
We're
the bottom?
starting right here. We're gonna change America.
Yes, we are.
One day at a time.
Civility,
We're gonna
civility.
wrap it up in a few minutes, but I just want to give anybody an opportunity to ask another question.
Okay.
So,
By being in it.
obviously Patchogue is the model of the way to build a downtown and to really develop a little village. Right now, I see that starting to happen in Bayshore.
Yeah.
Farmingdale's been after that same venue. Other than those two other towns, what other towns that they go to you for guidance? 'Cause I know most mayors do go to you for guidance.
I think Amityville, they got.
Amityville, you think is up and coming like
They had a
that?
series of great.
Ronkonkoma.
Really.
Ronkonkoma?
What about Ronkonkoma?
The Ronkonkoma hub. I think that's.
Different type of model though, you know?
In fact, on Ronkonkoma, when they were going through all the pieces, I testified a couple of times about the value of it. But I think that, that, Mineola's done a lot, over the years. I sit on some kind of village officials, to school board, and the mayor there, Belport, very small, but Ray Fell, the mayor there, has his hands on it. Just one other thing, whenever you talk about elections, I got 55 first cousins.
Oh, wow.
My mother had 7 brothers and sisters.
That
My
helps.
father had 7 of them by both sides.
You can get elected on their votes alone.
So I think when they started, in 2012, they were knocking on doors. They were knocking on doors, and their position was to attack me.
Right.
And I'll never forget, Tilly Farrell, Tilly Latino. At the time, she was probably 96 years old or 97 years old. And she died a couple of years ago at 106. So one of the candidates sat down the door and started badmouthing me. She threw him out of the house. His father grew up across the street. So someone has to be, is that the family had a name of credibility in the community.
It's credibility.
A lot of it had to do what they do, but also do you have credibility? People give you the first shot on credibility. Everyone after that is on what you do.
That's right.
So you got to have a position. You got to have the ability to sell the position you have to the community that you're in.
Do we have any more questions? We're going to close. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
Everybody gives you something to go home with. This is one of the last 2 weekends for your pancakes. That's from my son's maple stand in Maine. And we carried towards it.
I use maple. I typically every morning have oatmeal. Oatmeal's good for you until you add the maple syrup, butter, and milk.
I do the same thing.
So this is going to start tomorrow.
Nice.
That might only last you a week.
But thank you very much.